Shani Ahmed, Kashmir. She's a human rights activist, basically a Turkish, but now a UK citizen also. Shani is an international strategist. So we have with us Advocate Parvez Shah. Advocate Parvez Shah is senior member of All Parties Conference. He hails from Indian occupied Kashmir. He's a former General Secretary of the All Parties Conference. We have with us Nail Altaf Kiani, researcher, teacher, and a TV presenter at Muzaffarabad. So welcome to all the panelists and all the participants of this webinar. Today's discussion is on the delimitation of assembly segments in Indian-occupied Kashmir, India's another play to disempower the Muslim population of Indian-occupied Kashmir. Delimitation Commission, which was formed by the Indian government in May 2020 to redraw the assembly segments, boundaries of the assembly segments in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. This has produced a report with grave discrepancies of geographical continuity and to the population, along with population, a basic consideration in drawing the electoral constituencies. And the 84th Amendment of the Indian Constitution in 2002 declared that delimitation will be carried out after 2026, implying that the current commission has violated constitutional provisions and legal standards. Besides, India's Delimitation Act, including 2002, guarantees that though no delegate or who are represented or who are underrepresented. But when we see the current Delimitation Commissioner's report, we come to the conclusion that there are a lot of discrepancies and it has to benefit a particular group of people, a particular section of population, a particular ideology of population in this. If we go to the history of delimitation in occupied Jammu and Kashmir, the first commission, which was formed in 1951, it was on the census of 1941. But taking into consideration the massacre of 47 and also the migration of the people to Azad Kashmir and Pakistan in that time. So the total number of seats were 75, 43 seats were assigned to Kashmir Valley, 30 to Jammu and 2 to Ladakh. But we see a continuity in the disempowerment of the people of Kashmir Valley through these time-to-time delimitations. It's not only this delimitation commission which has disempowered the people of Kashmir, but all those delimitations which took in past, in one way or the other way, tried to decrease the size of the electables in the Assembly of Occupied Kashmir. So these in 1963, there was second delimitation commission. It was constituted on the basis of the census of 1961. Again, the seats in the assembly remained 75, but Kashmir was 42 and Jammu 31. One minus seat to Kashmir Valley and Jammu was added 1 and Ladakh had 2 seats. And the third delimitation took place in 1973 on the census report of 1971. 1 seat was raised, it was 76 now, but Kashmir remained 42 and Jammu 32. There is again an increase of 1 seat in Jammu. The fourth delimitation commission was formed in 1982, but it could not submit its report due to the political turmoil and the death of chairman and later the resignation of the new chairman. And fourth delimitation commission then could not produce any report, but the fifth delimitation commission, which was formed on the basis of census of 1991, that increased the seats in the assemblies 87. Kashmir Valley, it has 47 seats and Jammu had 46 seats and Jammu had 37 seats. And 5 seat increase was made in the Jammu and 4 seats increase were made in the Kashmir Valley. And again in Jammu, 7 seats were reserved for the scheduled castes. But now the Delimitation Commission, which was formed on May 2020, the Government of India, this Delimitation Commission, according to them, it presented its report on the census of 2011. And the population of Kashmir Valley is 68 lakhs and the population of Jammu is 83. Seats allocated to Kashmir Valley 47 and Jammu 43. It's not only that Kashmir Valley got only 1 seat and Jammu 7 seats. And the discrepancy which there is that for the Kashmir Valley, for 146,000 people got 1 seat, while in Jammu 120,000 people was allocated to 1 seat. Along with that, the way the seats were carved in the Jammu region and the seats in Kashmir Valley were allotted to the 3 seats to scheduled tribes. When we see the total population of scheduled tribes in Kashmir Valley or in whole of Jammu and Kashmir is 11%, but they have been given 9 seats in all. Like we see another discrepancy is that in Kishtawar, it's a Muslim-dominated area with 57% of Muslims and 40% of Hindus. There were previously 2 seats. Now there are 3 seats, and the 2 seats which have been carved out, they are carved out in the Hindu majority areas in order to benefit their population. And same way in Doda, the Muslim population is much bigger than the Hindu population, but 1 seat which was increased there, that has also been carved out of the population where the Hindu population is majority. And one of the surprising decisions which this Delimitation Commission has made, it has some of the parts of the Jammu, that's Poonch, Rajouri and other places have been merged with the parliamentary constituency of Anantnag. This is another way that in order to disempower the Kashmiris in the Parliament of India also, so that we know that in Kashmir, people do not vote, they do not come to the polling station to cast their vote because of this. And in order to benefit the other people, they have done this. So this is in a way with series of acts which government of took on August 5th, 2019 by dismembering the state and dividing the state into 2 union territories and thereafter enacting the new domicile law, and then lots of measures were taken in order to disempower the people of Kashmir. We will discuss this, what are its implications and what are the ramifications for that. So I will first go to Dr. Kaisar Raja. Dr. Saab, you have the floor.
Thank you, Wani Saab. First, for the very generous introduction, and secondly, for a very detailed preview and pretext. Some things were very illuminating for me, like someone who is the reader of Kashmir's issue and who has a deep eye on the unfolding developments. But something, they were like a significant addition to my understanding and to my knowledge as well. Definitely, we are at the cross current of very difficult times, where Hindu majoritarianism is set to engulf the Kashmiri identity, and it is likely to emerge as a juggernaut which has no end in the near sight. So what we have seen over the past a few years, I mean, when I look back at Kashmir, am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible.
Okay, so when we tend to look at the historical pretext of Kashmir, so Kashmir has a long history of subjugation which dates back to this India and Pakistan question. It is like for the past 400-500 years that Kashmiris, they have been stripped off from their right to rule themselves. So since 1939, Kashmir has not been governed and ruled by the indigenous Kashmiris. So that is why the resistance movement or the struggle or the history of subjugation of Kashmir, it dates on centuries. It is not just merely decades long anecdote. So secondly, when we look at Kashmir, the unfolding and the way this has been unleashed in the past 7 decades. So we definitely find no rescue and no recourse for Kashmiris, because for Kashmiris, each and every government, whether it had been Congress, whether it had been BJP, had been more or like similar dispensation, had followed more or like the similar dispensation. And unfortunately, when we have this opinion of the Indian civil society over Kashmir, there is a kind of a deaf consensus within India as well, whether it is center, whether it is right, whether it is left. They have kind of an unequivocal policy on Kashmir, and they have a kind of, same approach and same insensitivity and indifference towards Kashmiris. But the past these 8 years in particular, 2014 onwards, had been very uncharacteristic for Kashmiris. Initially, the way the soft Hindutva has been cultivated under this duress of Hindu majoritarianism and Hindu dominance and Hindu supremacism, kind of proto-fascist dispensation which we have had witnessed in the past 8 years. So that is now leading to something which is creating, or which is set to create an imbroglio, and which merits a very serious attention. Unfortunately, I happen to recall once this Brijesh Mishra, National Advisor to National Security Advisor of India, made a comment that Kashmir is a litmus test to India's great power status. So that is unfortunately a bitter reality, that India envisages Kashmir as a litmus test for its great power status. They believe that they can continue playing their ploy in Kashmir, replicating the model of Israel. So, and with an absolute impunity. Now, post August 5th, 2019's landscape is even more horrifying. It is how Kashmiris, they have been legally, constitutionally, and that too in a very manipulative manner, they have been stripped off from their basic rights. Their lands which have been pledged for the mortgage with the banks, and when Article 370 was intact, are getting stripped off and are getting allotted to Hindus. More than 5 million domiciles have been issued. Article 35, with the revocation of the Article 35A, the massive settlements in Kashmir are underway. The first military colony, the construction of first military colony is also underway. So when we look all of these things in a holistic manner, they turn out to be nightmarish for Kashmiris in particular. So this delimitation is another nefarious design by Hindu supremacist proto-fascist regime in New Delhi. And this is actually to basically estrange Kashmiris within their own region, to confiscate them. And what is happening to minorities in India and Muslims in particular over the past 2 weeks is symptomatic of this fact. And it is reflective of this argument which I am making over here, that India is onto a very strange transition. And unfortunately, what India always wanted to be. This is a transition which they always desired for. I quote Arundhati Roy over here, where she says that 80% of the Indians are still living in the 19th century. And very rare of them are living in the 20th century, and a handful of the people are living in the 21st century. So the kind of what Modi government is right now doing in India and Kashmir in particular is not surprising, but the acceptance from within India and its civil society, it is more agonizing, and it is even more than astonishing. So Indians, it has become a new normal in India. You see that this bulldozer justice, it had been very vehemently embraced by their mainstream media and it has been celebrated by their national televisions, and it had been clamored as something which is legitimate. So this is right now the true and the ugly face of Indian democracy, which has taken a majoritarian and illiberal stride. It is something which is, I mean, I get taken aback that international community for how long would keep with its blind eye on India. India has raised a kind of iron curtain vis-a-vis what is happening within India and what is happening outside. So all, I believe that Kashmir in particular is basically a test case for international society's commitment in raising a liberal and just society. It is basically a test case for all those liberal ideals which have been proclaimed and which have been promulgated over the last a few decades. International community will have to come up front. Now coming to this delimitation design, it is, as I said, it is nefarious and it is manipulative to the nth degree. Reason being, if you see, as Vani Saab has pointed out in his earlier preview, that the way this majoritarian underpinning had been induced and inculcated into this delimitation commission, it in itself speaks volume of the insincerity and disingenuous undercurrent of this entire exercise. So it is taking place after having issued more than 5 million domiciles to non-Kashmiris. Secondly, by allocating seats to the Azad Kashmir and diaspora, basically they are trying to alter the demography. And this is the ploy of the settler colonialism and altered geography, which is right now right on the move within Kashmir. So what India aspires for is basically to alienate Kashmiris, one, to make them alien within their own lands, and secondly, to politically isolate them. So they wish to, before they bring it to the J&K's Legislative Assembly, all that uncharacteristic change of August of 5th, 2019, they want to make it sure that it gets approbated and it gets affirmed and validated by the Assembly of the J&K. So this is grossly unconstitutional and it is patently illegal. So I remember a decision of the Indian Supreme Court when it, in the past, it heard the case against Article 370, and where Indian Supreme Court remarked that you cannot do something indirectly which you can't do directly. So all of this exercise, you see, is implicit and is misdirected in a manner so that Kashmiris, they become aloof and they get isolated and alienated politically and then to demographically as well. India intends to raise a Gaza-like situation within Kashmir. This is very horrifying. Genocide alert has issued a threat of genocide within Kashmir, an impending genocide. Kashmiris, they have been stripped off from their right to live with dignity. Their civic liberties are confiscated. We are living into those strange times where people are apprehended for their thinking. This UAPA, this Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, it is perhaps the most draconian acts of the modern times. Kashmiris have been subject to the first massive blinding of the human history. All of these things, they are uncharacteristic, they are unprecedented, and they have been egregiously unleashed upon Kashmiris. But the world still continues to give a muted response and a blind eye to what is happening within Kashmir.
So this Kashmiri resistance movement, I reiterate, it does not span over last 30, 35 years. It neither dates back onto last 70 years. It is the struggle of last hundreds of years. They have fought against the invaders. They have resisted against the foreign rulers. So if Indians, they think that they would be able to do this in this manipulative manner, and they would be able to set everything and brush everything aside, so they are sadly mistaken. This delimitation commission, it carries no legitimacy. It is patently and grossly unconstitutional. It is illegal. The design is ulterior, and this in its hindsight, it carries an intrinsic mala fide, which believes into the disenfranchisement of the Kashmiris. So as now when I speak, I believe that this is the very high time where we will have to engage international society. One is with due apologies, but sitting into Pakistan and convincing the Pakistani audience and telling them that Kashmiris are subject to egregious human rights violations, it is like almost convincing the convinced. We have to engage the international audience. If international system, which is paradoxical and dichotomous and is not responding to us given their intertwined economic interests with India, so there exists an international society as well, which we need to engage proactively. I appreciate this exercise, but at the same time, we will have to put up this case vigorously before all the quarters concerned. We'll have to initiate a lawfare against this thing. Unfortunately, we are not abandoning our happy, lucky go trilogy of diplomatic, moral, and political support. The time is unprecedented, situation is uncharacteristic. We'll have to stand, we'll have to take up a proactive approach, and we'll have to carry forward a concerted, indigenous and inclusive narrative. Kashmir is not just merely, like when we say about, or when we talk about Kashmir, we merely in our imagination thinks that Kashmir is perhaps Valley and Srinagar. That's it. That's not the case. We'll have to come up with the indigenous inclusive narrative, combining all the conflict geographies. We'll have to take up it as a very focused and a concerted narrative. I repeat a Chinese proverbial, not a statement, but a kind of what you may call it as an assertion, that there are certain disputes within the modern statecraft. Some of them, they emerge as the crisis, and you have a very short time to respond to them. Some requires meticulous planning. For that, you have to employ your resources, and then you forward them, and then you try to resolve them. And then there are the certain crises for which you need to raise an entire generation. You have to create a narrative for that matter. So I also urge through your forum, when we use dispute for this word, when we use this nomenclature of Kashmir dispute, we are actually doing injustice to this cause. Dispute has a territorial connotation. Kashmir is a conflict. Kashmir has multi-layered conflict propositions. It has gender dimensions. It implies the laws of the non-combatants. It corresponds to the Charter of the National Self-Determination. So Kashmir is not just merely a dispute. The world is not interested in listening to the historical antecedents of the territorial disputes, because there are so many. So that is why we have to brandish this issue as a conflict, a multi-layered conflict. What can be more agonizing that men are getting killed and women are getting raped? This in itself is a very painful binary. So people are getting tied up with the jeeps and getting paraded in the streets. So when we, I mean, and then this argument that India is doing this to develop Kashmir, is development is a redundant colonial construct. We will not give you civic liberties, but we will develop you. So this is something which has turned obsolete in the modern times. So that is why we will have to come up with, I mean, the unfoldings post August 5th, 2019 merit a serious resolve and a change roadmap. So I remember once at one forum, I said it to the higher ups that the Kashmiris were looking towards the change roadmap, but you issued a change map. So that's the unfortunate thing. हमें रोड मैप को चेंज करने की जरूरत है, मैप को चेंज करने की जरूरत शायद बाद में आए. Thank you, Wani Saab. My pleasure speaking to this forum.
Thank you, sir, and Dr. Saab, for your wonderful input. It was very huge in nature, the way you elaborated things from history to the current situations, and as rightly said, the time is unprecedented and the situation is uncharacteristic. So we need to change the modus operandi of our advocacy and all that. And you rightly pointed out that we do not need to change the map at present. We need to change our strategy, how to go ahead, but that will change the map automatically if we will change our strategy to that. And it's true that we need to have to engage the international civil society. That's what we are trying to do in our limited resources. Our last webinar was almost, we had 5 of the speakers, all were from the international civil society who contributed to that webinar.
I truly appreciate it.
Yeah, I am now, unfortunately due to the pandemic, we could not have the access to other places, but now slowly and steadily the situation is getting better and hopefully we will engage them. And it is also the entire need at the top level that we have to find out the people in the diaspora so that we may get the intellectual input from our people. In order to, the street is fine. We go to streets and we protest the streets, that's good. But at the same time, we need the intellectual input from the diaspora to galvanize the support at international level. Thank you, Dr. Saab, very much for your presentation. Now I will go to Naila Altaf Kiani Saiba. As she is in Muzaffarabad, at any time there will be electric cut and she will go offline. Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. Naila, unmute.
Okay. Thank you very much for your consideration. And yes, the electricity is already gone, but I hope the UPS works for a while. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, WMC and Altaf Wani Sahab, to honor me with yet another opportunity to talk on this August forum. A lot has already been said about the delimitation exercise and the draft recommendations today, especially Wani Sahab has thrown enough light on all the discrepancies and different aspects of the draft. I would maybe discuss today why this draft has spurred fears in Muslim population of the marginalization. This is now an open secret, ladies and gentlemen, that with the reading down of Article 370 in August 2019, India has taken each and every step carefully crafted to change the internal character of the Kashmir conflict and to erode completely the very identity of Kashmir, which to be noted is the only singular Muslim majority state in India, illegally occupied by India though. We must know that Jammu Kashmir Assembly was separately governed by the Constitution of Jammu and Kashmir under Article 1957 till now. It should also be noted that Jammu and Kashmir parliamentary seats remained delimited on the basis of 1981 census, and on the basis of these, elections in 1996 were held in Jammu and Kashmir. There was no census in 1991, and no delimitation commission was set up after the 2001 census. And Jammu Kashmir Assembly passed a law to which froze the further delimitation until 2026. This freeze was also upheld by the Supreme Court of India. But this freeze was reversed by the Indian Parliament by passing Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act 2019, when they stripped off the erstwhile princely state of its special status, which means that there is no separate constitution for Jammu and Kashmir for now. It is worth mentioning here also that this Reorganization Act 2019 is pending before the Supreme Court of India as well. Now, according to the Election Commission of India's own data, over the last 6 decades, Muslim majority Kashmir's share of the seats in the erstwhile Legislative Assembly of Jammu and Kashmir increased only 9%, while Hindu majority Jammu increased 47%. Altaf Fani Saab has already deliberated in this with detail. We all know that delimitation is a periodic exercise to redraw parliamentary and assembly constituencies by population and then geographical aspects. And by principle, a state's population determines mainly the number of elected representatives, and India's constitutional system follows this principle rigorously, religiously. But when it came to Jammu and Kashmir, India clearly violated this principle. According to 2001 census reports, Jammu had 44% of the population, while it has been given 48% of the representation in electoral assembly, while Kashmir, with 56% of the population, has been given 52% of representation. India claims that they have closed the gap between both parts, geographical parts, but it violates, but the Valleyites, on the other hand, believe that Jammu has been given undue advantage. BJP, on the other hand, is emerging as the single largest party in Jammu and Kashmir when the elections will be held, because the 6 new seats given to Jammu are carved out of the areas where Hindus are predominantly in population, in majority. Also, the addition of the areas like Poonch and Rajouri, as Altaf Fani Saab also mentioned here, to Islamabad or Anantnag shows that BJP is clearing hurdles in the way of getting more Jammu parliamentary seats, because it was always trailing behind in these areas like Poonch and Rajouri sectors. So they are actually trying to grab more Jammu parliamentary seats by doing this exercise. This is a classic example of electoral engineering to disempower a particular community and a religion, that is Muslims, obviously. Here, clearly, an electoral majority is being converted into a minority using state institutions which were supposed to be neutral in any democracy. India, although when it comes to Kashmir, is not a democracy, but a fascist country. This is also to be noted that a Muslim that in a constituency in Kashmir, which is Muslim constituency, obviously, there are going to be 1.4 lakh voters, while in assembly constituency in Jammu, it is barred at 1.2 lakhs only. This is also a discrepancy, and this is also a disadvantage that Kashmiri Muslims are going to have. Another serious implication, in my view, is that this discriminatory exercise is bound to widen the gulf between Jammu and Kashmir regions. This enmity, or I should say divide, has always existed between the two regions, and this present draft recommendation is largely seen as giving advantage to Jammu at the cost of Kashmir. And this, as a result of this exercise, would be worse regional ties, whatever there are. India is deliberately widening this gulf for its advantage. Playing along the regional and religious fault lines is very dangerous for an already vulnerable conflict zone like Kashmir and Jammu. It is worth mentioning here that another petition has already been filed against this draft recommendation as well in Supreme Court of India, but this exercise is generally, by and large, unconstitutional in any way, because the Supreme Court has yet to rule on the controversial removal of Jammu and Kashmir's special constitutional status on August 5, 2019. by the revocation of Article 35A, which prevented demographic transformation by halting outsiders from grabbing land here in Kashmir. And also, if Jammu and Kashmir had an electoral government, legitimate government here, the delimitation would have occurred a decade from now. I would like to end here. This exercise is not, but among the things already in the pipeline, which are to demarginalize the Muslim population in Kashmir.
Thank you, Naila, for your presentation. To rightly point out, this is illegal, this is immoral, and this is unconstitutional exercise by the Indian government. But Indian government is taking refuge on one hand through its courts, which are not hearing the petitions on Article 370, 35A, and on the other hand, the mute response from the international community on what is happening in Kashmir. So now I will go to Shani. Shani was the first to join us. Shani, your deliberation on the subject.
Thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, my dear brothers and sisters in Kashmir, and thank you for this invaluable panel of participants. And thank you, Altaf Saab and Kashmir Institute of International Relations and WMC. Well, first of all, it will be timely to remember the actuality about the 10 stages of genocide. And this is where we will take our proceedings from. So, first one is the classification, symbolization, second one. Discrimination goes as the third. Dehumanization, organization, polarization, preparation, persecution, extermination, and denial. So they are the 10 stages of genocide. So let's pick up from here. Which those 10 stages are, unfortunately, today are being widely applied in the area in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. So this is why we are having this conversation today. Well, particularly with the ongoing discrimination, organization, polarization, preparation, persecution activities, which clearly is sealed with the delimitation outcome in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And the clearer signals about future disempowerment in the region are being introduced once again, and this time with the newly revised electoral map in India. After all, this current Delimitation Act will indeed strengthen India's power over Kashmir, whilst contributing towards diminishing the native locals in the region, with its sinister base taking its lines from the previously mentioned various stages of genocide agenda. But the reality is the delimitation practice does point to a clear gerrymandering towards Indian occupied Kashmir, as it is a political manipulation. Gerrymandering is a political manipulation with an intent to create an extra advantage for central Indian administration. So this is all about the story. Furthermore, with the cracking the constituencies, the existing ruling political party, BJP, in India will secure even higher votes from the favored districts whilst representing the discriminated ones. So this is the name of the game, gerrymandering. Alas, at this stage, despite all the criticism and objections from the international human rights representatives, there is very limited maneuver to consider when it comes to the Delimitation Commission of India. Because the Delimitation Commission of India has been established by the Government of India under the provisions of the Delimitation Commission Act, plus the present delimitation of the constituencies has been done on the basis of 2001 census under the provision of Delimitation Act 2002. And when the constitution of the country was amended in 2002, was particularly pointing about not to interstate the delimitation of constituencies until 2026. In the meantime, the Indian administration has reconstituted the Delimitation Commission for Jammu and Kashmir in 2020. This means all the practice will continue until 2026 indeed. Then later, operation will be taken considering the basis of the population in the region. And we know what's happening with the population in the region right now. Hence, this is how triggering the Article 370 in 5th of August 2019 was also a part of a well-calculated plan with deliberate demographical changes targeting particularly the region of Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and perfectly well serving to the BJP's gerrymandering agenda. Moreover, into the bargain, the Delimitation Commission of India is an independent body whose orders cannot be challenged in any court of law in India. Well, here we go. Now, we all must come to a realization that Indian-occupied Kashmir has indeed been brutally forced to this delimitation as per today, and that was a long-lasting part of a plan. Because in truly democratic world, this should be done by considering the population density, region's socio-geographic features and distribution, community of interest, and human rights surely at heart. Not with some long-planned gerrymandering, which also aiming to prevent the racial minorities from electing their preferred candidates from representing them. Well, besides, the right of people's self-determination is a basic principle in international law, which is well protected by the UN, United Nations. And this law clearly states that people, based on the respect for the principle of equality, equal rights, and fair equality of opportunity, have the right to freely choose their sovereignty and international political status with no interference. Of course, the UN also declares that self-determination movement demands need to be accepted by the existing sovereign state before the international community can formally engage with them. Then, having said so, and ironically enough, within these multiple principles, here we are standing with a potential solution, really, to this crisis as well. Just for the sake of the human rights, let's see the angle. In fact, as a possible action and as a possible option could be taken, could point to this direction. Here we go with the cases about ongoing brutalities in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, sending the persistently collected evidences to the prosecutors in ICC eventually might trigger an action for the prosecutors to open an investigation in the occupied territory and to demand from India to accept ICC's jurisdiction. That's the chance he may consider to take. So because ICC can indeed investigate individuals from non-member states if the non-member state accepts the court's jurisdiction alone, or if with the United Nations Security Council, UNSG's authorization. So, as I have also mentioned earlier, since the delimitation process has been complete in India, leaving the occupied Kashmir to face more discrimination, and since no courts in India can interfere with the decision of the delimitation committee for now, as we had mentioned the reality about the law earlier, then since in the sovereign jurisdictions, whilst the Indian administration couldn't provide a solution within their judicial system and courts, since the United Nations has also declared on their principles, there should be a potential possibility for the United Nations Security Council interference towards referring this particular case to ICC under the principle of complementarity. So the good but challenging news, here it is. This is exactly where we need to continue reminding to United Nations Security Council again, and to everyone. We have to insist on this point. Human rights should never be protected differently, depending on people where they are, or depending on the United Nations members' political, economic, logistic, military, trade position, in national and international stand, as well as the internationally tactical benefits they offer. So when we really begin to defend human rights for the sake of the people, we will achieve many, many victories, inshallah. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Shani. You discussed about the stages of genocide, which have been almost complete in Kashmir, and the ongoing genocide in Kashmir, and also the reparations which are available for the people of Kashmir, that is to reminding the UN Security Council and other human rights mechanisms, as well as ICC for this, and so that prosecutors could swing in. I will now go to our last speaker, Advocate Parvez Ahmed Shah. Advocate sir, you have the floor now.
Thank you, Anisa. Thank you, KIR. On behalf of all parties Hurriyat Conference, I am highly thankful to Kashmir Institute of International Relations and Vanisa and those panelists who are joining us in this webinar for putting the Kashmiri's point of view across the globe. And Vanisa, you have in your intro, you have wonderfully represented what this delimitation is going to do Kashmiris and how it will affect and how it will disempower to the people of Jammu and Kashmir. But let us have a cursory glance on the pages of the history. If we go in 1947, when India occupied Jammu and Kashmir against the wishes of the aspirations of the people of Jammu and Kashmir, and the objective of the India was to occupy the state and deprive the Kashmiris of its resources, because knowing the fact that Jammu Kashmir has minerals, it has sufficient resources for electricity, it has forests, and it has a beauty, and above all, it has a strong economy. So when India occupied Jammu and Kashmir, but faced a strong resistance from the people of Jammu and Kashmir, and then it went to the United Nations, and this was a turn, and ultimately United Nations passed a couple of resolutions for the resolution of the Kashmir dispute, and people of Jammu and Kashmir were given a right to self-determination. And this was the turning point where India started to think on other lines, that is how to disempower the people of Jammu and Kashmir, how to force them to surrender before the Indian brute force. And we have seen in past, as you just discussed, that there have been 4 to 5 delimitation commissions established by the government of India. But if we go for the first 3, there was a little change. If we see in the delimitation of 1951, the total number of seats was 75, and Kashmir had 43, and Jammu had 30, and Ladakh 2. And another delimitation commission in 1961, the ratio was 75, and Kashmir was with 1 seat, and to Jammu 1 more seat. So there was no drastic change. But in 1937, also it remained same. 1 seat was increased from 75. It was 76, and Kashmir had 42, and Jammu had 32 plus 1. So there was no difference. But that last delimitation, which was established by government of India in 2020, barring all the courts from taking any cognizance or looking into its veracity, whether this delimitation commission can be subject to the judicial scrutiny. It was strictly prohibited that no writ petition can be filed against it, and it cannot be challenged against in the court of law. And at the same time, when this delimitation commission was constituted the people of Jammu and Kashmir and the political parties, especially those political parties who have in past who had a tilt towards India, they raised a number of questions, and ultimately the delimitation commission made a statement that these political parties will be given their chance of hearing, and after hearing these political parties, the report will be submitted to the parliament, and ultimately it will be made the law. But we have seen that although the representation of these political parties was in this delimitation commission, but unfortunately what they recommended, it was not taken seriously. And after this report was published, we have seen that the political forces, the political parties of Indian administered Kashmir showed strong resentment and rejected. If we just see that, we have just seen that why a drastic change was made in the report, which was, I'm just talking about the Delimitation Commission of 2022. And if we make a comparison with the other delimitation commissions who in past made small changes, why was this huge drastic change made by this delimitation commission? And the fact of the matter is that India for the last 4 years could not stop Kashmiris from demanding their right to self-determination. And in 5th of August, it reached to the conclusion when it changed the Article 370, when it abrogated Article 370 and 35A, it reached to the conclusion that these elections does not make any change in Kashmir, although these elections in the past were mostly rigged. So they decided to make the constitutional attack on Kashmir and take the recourse to the laws which are applicable to Jammu and Kashmir, and by this way disempower Kashmiris. We have seen that since 5th of August, if we see the objective behind this delimitation is that if we see the number of seats by this delimitation, there are total number of seats is 87. And when we see Kashmir Valley has given 46 plus 4 and Jammu 37 plus 5 and Ladakh has 4. So when we make the counting of these seats, it is equal ratio between that. The Jammu as well as Kashmir has equal seats, and the objective behind this is to bring a non-Hindu chief minister to this state and to sell it to the Indian audience, because in BJP in its election manifesto had promised it to this fascist audience that they will annex the state of Jammu and Kashmir, rather they will make Jammu and Kashmir a part of India, and at the same time their dream could not be completed until they bring the chief minister, Hindu chief minister, and thereby disempower the people of Jammu and Kashmir. But the unfortunate thing is that what India is doing, or what India has done, it is unfortunately, it is affecting the people's right to self-determination, for which the people of Jammu and Kashmir are struggling. We have seen that in High Commissioner's report to Human Rights Council, it was clearly mentioned to both India and Pakistan that both India and Pakistan will not make any change in the territory of Jammu and Kashmir that will deprive the people of Jammu and Kashmir from their right to self-determination, or it will affect their right to self-determination. But we have seen that since that report, which was submitted by High Commissioner to United Nations Human Rights Council, India had made number of changes. We have seen it has abrogated Article 370, and at the same time 35A was also deleted from the Indian Constitution, which made a room for the non-Kashmiris to settle in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And we have just one of our speakers has just said that more than 5 million people have been given this domicile certificate, and it means once the domicile is issued, it makes them eligible to purchase the land in the Jammu and Kashmir. So we have to see if these non-Kashmiris are settled in occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and how it will compromise the people's right to self-determination. So it is the responsibility of the United Nations to take the cognizance of what India is doing in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. This is the one. And secondly, we have seen that in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, we have seen there have been dramatic changes are taking place on daily basis. We have seen that almost the bureaucracy in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir has been replaced by the bureaucracy from India. And we have seen that it has created a wide gap between the people of Kashmir and those bureaucrats, because there are language barriers, and the people of Jammu and Kashmir are frightened. So what I mean to say finally, that India has adopted the multi-pronged strategy, and the basic objective is to frustrate the people's right to self-determination. And it is very important that the Pakistan have a party to the dispute, has to take some concrete steps. As one of our colleagues was just talking, that we have to activate the lawfare, we have to approach international community, and we have to take effective diplomatic measures so that we can at least preserve the people's right to self-determination. And it is, if we can save this, if we can at least stop India from settling non-Kashmiris in the occupied Jammu and Kashmir, we will be in a position to save the people's right to self-determination. Whether it is decided today or tomorrow, it will be decided when a population of the Jammu and Kashmir be kept intact. So once again, I'm highly thankful to you and the Kashmir Institute of International Relations for giving me the space to talk and put my point of view across. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Advocate Parvez Shah, for your wonderful contribution. You rightly pointed out that people of Kashmir will continue to fight against this injustice, and what India is trying to do to disempower the Muslim population of Kashmir by different tactics and by making them landless, jobless, and at the end homeless. The way the target killings are taking place in Kashmir, the way the confiscation of properties is taking place, the way the demolition of properties is taking place in Kashmir, and on the other hand, the draconian legislations imposed like this one as a Delimitation Commission, where you have no right to appeal to anywhere to this injustice. And the main aim of the BJP government, the Hindutva government, is to install an Hindu chief minister. On one hand, they are trying to the demography on the ground by bringing in the non-state subjects to the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. But on the other hand, the fast track measure they have adopted is this delimitation process, by which they will change the numbers in the assembly also, which is being created to give nod to all those illegal legislations which India had made from 5th August onwards in the absence of the state assemblies otherwise. So thank you all of you for giving me such a wonderful time. And as today we were expecting Barrister Tanveer Munir, but he sent a message. He was in a court and could not attend this webinar. And we will see him in the next webinar, inshallah. Thank you all for joining us. Shani, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All the best to everybody. Bye all. Thank you. Thank you.